6 creepy tales and true stories. This video will feature 4 true stories and 2 not so true stories, read by various narrators. Scary Workplace Experience by Cuddles the Clown, narrated by Creep Reads. I am a closing manager for a major movie theatre chain. My location is in a semi-major city in the southwest region of the United States. I'm a female college student and a night owl, so I always get assigned these late shifts. The part of town that my location is in isn't regarded as a very safe part of town, for many reasons. It was a slow Wednesday night, and I was already well ahead of schedule with my duties for the night and was helping my employees stock in the concession area. I'd already locked the front doors. The usher was almost done with his work for the night. The box office attendant had one more floor, and the concession assistant was scheduled to get out with me and the other manager in about 2 hours. There are 3 levels of access in my theatre. There's customer access that consists of locations that are accessible to customers and essentially everyone. There's employee access, which is protected by a keypad lock. Then there's manager access, which requires a key to access. I was going into an employee access area where all the paper products were stored. I was intending on bringing a box of napkins to stock the concession area with. So the concession area is connected to the entrance lobby area of the building. Theatres 1 to 8 are in order down an open hallway immediately to the right of the concession area after the ticket taker's podium. Theatres 9 to 14 are in a hallway that is perpendicular to the main hallway. It forks off just in front of the men's room and Theatre 4. The employee access closet I was getting into was directly in front of Theatre 9 and to the right of Theatre 14. There was a bench right at this area where a customer was sitting. He seemed to be minding his own business as I arrived to the closet. The box office assistant for the night had concerns about this man because he appeared to be drunk at her counter. But while I was taking my break, the other manager on that night approved the transaction. He was supposed to be there with another friend. I didn't think much about this at first because while he seemed to be looking at me, I just figured he was bored and waiting for someone. I proceed to key in the code for the closet and enter. I noticed rather quickly that he tried to shoot the gap as the door closed. I decided to try shutting the door as hard as I could. I was uncertain it would get to him in time, but I figured I could at least catch his fingers with the door and buy myself enough time to draw the box cutter I had in my person. Thankfully for me, the door closed in time. He pounded on the door and was shouting, "Let me in!" at the top of his lungs. He also tried guessing the keypad code and keying in. All of my scheduled closing employees and the other manager were still in various areas of the building at this point. We communicated using headsets and radios. I called for 2 people to meet me at the floor closet. I was calm and collected, but pressed that it was an urgent matter. The other manager and the usher came to meet me within a minute of my call. The usher helped the man outside, and the other manager came to walk me out. The guy was refusing to leave, claiming that he had items in the theatre still. As the usher tells it, there were many bar bottles of liquor everywhere around his seat. The friend he was allegedly meeting that night was also nowhere to be found. The guy should have been in Theatre 9, in front of the closet I was getting into. I gathered the boxes I was supposed to bring outside from the trip and bring them to the concession area. We have large windows and glass doors throughout the lobby. I could see him outside, staring through the doors at me for several minutes. I decide to call the police. He is arrested after not leaving the spot. They charged him with public intoxication for the large amount of alcohol he consumed in the theatre, but he wasn't charged with the closet incident because we couldn't prove his intentions. We looked up his name after we had him formally banned from the premises upon his arrest. These sorts of records are all public in my state, so we could see everything he had been charged with. The results were chilling. Being arrested for voyeurism with a victim under 18 and attempted rape about 10 years ago, and had been out of prison for about a year as well as a laundry list of other related crimes before that. We haven't seen him around since. MySpace Love Connection by Floyd Pinkman, narrated by KingSpook.
So, needless to say, this is a throwaway account. This is a story I've never told anyone, because how the hell do you admit to your family that you were almost abducted? This happened to me when I was 11, or, if you will, in 2005. It was a usual summer day for me. I got up at about noon, went on a bike ride with my brother, then came home and spent most of the remaining daylight in our above-ground pool. We were well off, but by no means rich. So, as I was relaxing for the night, and intent on spending the rest of the night playing video games, I decided to check my MySpace profile really quick, and spend some of the energy on my games there. As I finish off my Dog Wars energy bar, I'm fit to close out the browser and head back downstairs to play some PlayStation, when I get a friend request. Allie, 13, 3 hours away from nowhere, Kentucky. I clicked the name because I didn't know an Allie, not even an Allison, or really any girls who had A names at all. She was pretty, and 11-year-old me just scoffed like, why would she want to be friends with me? I almost ignored it. Almost. I accepted the request, and with not much else to do, I sent her a message asking a simple question like, should I know you from somewhere? She tells me we've not met, but she's friends with one of my friends, Mike. I check out her profile, see she and Mike share a lot of common interests, are on each other's friends list, and so it checks out. I don't message Mike to ask him about her, but I was a very trusting young boy, and had no reason to believe she was anything but what she said she was. For the next few weeks, I'd talk to her every night, for no less than 3 hours usually. We'd just chat about things, school, music, television, typical kid things. I didn't really think anything about it more than just being MySpace friends, until she said that she liked me. I sort of laughed it off, thinking she just meant like in the way friends like each other. However, she clarified that she meant she'd had feelings for me and wanted to meet in real life. She lived pretty far away from me, so I didn't really see how this would be possible. I knew my parents were not about to take me to some girl I'd met online's house. I wouldn't want them to in the first place. They were decent parents and all, I just never felt I could talk to them about these kinds of things, so I just sort of shrugged it off. I told her it'd be hard for us to meet, because as much as I like riding my bike, a 3-hour bike ride to a part of the state I'd hardly even been to before was not something I'd be comfortable doing. She was very understanding and said that she at least wanted to talk on the phone instead of just via messages. I agreed, but told her never to call my number and to always let me be the one to call her because I didn't want my parents picking up and asking questions. She understood, and I called her. The first time I got her dad, and he gave me a gruff, "Who is this?" It was weird because I had the phone with me at the computer and told her I was calling, and she said she had the phone with her as well. However, I didn't think anything of it at all. I told him it was James and that I was looking for Allie. He told me to hold on a second, and there was a rustling sound on the phone, like someone trying to make it sound like they were handing it over to someone. Again, I didn't really think anything of it, and when I heard a high-pitched "hello," I didn't really think anything more of it. We talked for a few minutes, then she said she had to go because her dad was expecting a call as well. I shrugged it off and told her to just message me and we could talk again later. We kept messaging back and forth for a while, Before I knew it, it was almost the end of the summer, and she was not satisfied having not met me in person yet. So she posed an idea. She said there was an end of summer event going on at a lake near my house. She said she and her family used to go there sometimes, and that she could probably talk them into going there for the event. My family usually went to the area on 4th of July and stuff, and having just had a nice time there in July, it wasn't too hard for me to convince my folks as well. A few nights later, she lets me know that they had agreed and that she was super excited to finally meet me. She told me she was going to kiss me as soon as she saw me. I just sort of blushed and tried my best to make it sound like it wasn't a big deal, like I was some stud who'd kissed plenty of girls before. But I wasn't. I was totally pumped to finally kiss a girl, and it was only a few nights away. I had a hard time sleeping, and the next couple of nights I stayed up most of the night talking to Allie. We were both excited and couldn't wait to meet. It was very much a magical experience. The night before, I think I stayed up until 8 a.m. talking to her. So the day had come, and after an early afternoon bike ride and a short swim, our family loaded into the car, and my dad took the truck so that my brother and I could take our bikes to the lake with us. There was plenty of bike trails, and we always enjoyed riding there. I told my brother I wasn't going to be hanging with him the whole night, and would only ride with him a little bit before I went to meet another friend. He wanted to tag along, like little brothers often do, but I quickly convinced him he wouldn't want to hang out with me because the kids were mean, and I was only hanging out with them because I liked one of them. He didn't ask questions after that. About an hour later, the sun was starting to set, and my brother said he was going back to meet with our parents anyway. He didn't like riding in the dark. He had a habit of crashing as it was. So when I ventured off on my own, it was without hindrance. I made my way to the picnic area Allie and I'd agreed to meet at, and I sat on one of the picnic tables, my bike resting against the side. I sat for a long time, so long that I began to get worried, and was ready to leave because the fireworks were about to start and Allie hadn't shown up yet. I stood up and jumped down from the picnic table, and just as I did, a rusty, old white pickup truck pulled up beside the tables. The man inside reached across the cab to roll down the window and gave me a weird smile, telling me that he was Allie's dad and that he was going to take me to her. I started feeling strange about the situation, so I just gave him a blank stare and said, "What?" He turned the engine off, thinking maybe I couldn't hear him over the sound of it, and climbed out of the truck. "I'm here to take you to Allie. Hop on in," he said, opening the passenger door and motioning for me to climb in. The truck was full of garbage, and it looked very dirty, and I could smell oil and other things coming from it. I gave a crooked look and told him I wasn't going to get in. As he grabbed me by the arm and pulled me towards the truck, I realized pretty quickly what he was all about. "Get in the damn truck," he barked, squeezing my arm so tightly that I thought it was broken. I pulled away, practically giving myself an Indian burn as I told him I was leaving. He came after me, so I did the only thing I could think to do to repel a grown man twice my size and probably thrice my age. I reared back and kicked him square in the genitals. I didn't wait to see how he handled the blow. I hopped on my bike and pedaled with all my might back to the other side of the lake where my family was. He didn't follow me. At least, I don't think he did. If he did, he might have seen my dad, who is a rather large guy, and definitely not someone you'd want to fight with after he'd had a few beers. I never saw him again, and when I got home and went to message Allie to tell her what a jerk her dad was, the profile was gone. I saw Mike just before school started, and he said he had no idea who Allie was, and didn't even remember adding her on MySpace. It wasn't until some years later I realized how terribly close I'd come to being abducted. And God knows what that man wanted to do to me.
I used to do a lot of drugs by DVS 369, narrated by Let's Read.
Back in my early 20s, I was trying to kick a major 4-year heroin addiction. Like I said, trying. On my own, which meant that I wasn't using as much and it would be months in between. On this fateful day, someone had given me 2 OC80s. This was when the price of such goodies hasn't reached the almost $100 a piece mark. I had never seen these. They were fairly new on the streets, so after getting off of work at the little coffee shop I worked at, I popped the 2 teeny tiny treats in my mouth and hopped on the train to head into Boston to go see one of my fave punk bands. Now, anyone who knows about kicking a habit, when you start to use less, your tolerance goes down. So number 1 rule there is use less than you're used to. And I had no idea how strong one of these things were. And like I said, major habit. So of course I took them both. And for those who don't know, 1 OC80 is enough to let a 200-pound junkie feel good. So being a 110-pound girl that hasn't touched the stuff in a couple of months, I don't even remember the show. Never mind do I know how I got on the train and off at my stop. Anyways, by the time I got to my ratty little borough of Beantown, I was throwing up every 20 feet or so. I could barely keep my eyes open, but I didn't live in a very good part of the city, and curling up on a corner and hoping I didn't die was not an option. So I propped myself up along the walls and was trying to inconspicuously hurl while trying to make the 5 blocks to my apartment. I was about halfway there when I noticed a shitty car going really slow behind me. I figured whoever was in it was looking for a hooker. The part of town I lived in, anyone could be a hooker. So I just turned and looked at him and shook my head. This was usually enough to get them to drive on. It wasn't. Guy pulls right up to me in this 30-year-old crappy green Honda or something and says in a very thick, what I'm guessing, and please don't tear me apart for not knowing, Korean accent.
You need help? Get in, get in.
The man looked to be about 30 and of Asian descent, dressed in jeans, blue tattered t-shirt, and I kid you not, a tux jacket. That has nothing to do with anything. I just thought it strange. Living in Boston, you see some strange stuff. Now, even being a junkie, punk chick, I was always a polite girl who was so nice to strangers as to not hurt anyone's feelings, and because of this, I would get myself into dangerous situations, and I knew this. So I just wiped the puke off my mouth and smiled at the guy and said, "Thanks, but my boyfriend is waiting for me just down the street." There was no boyfriend, and I actually had quite a bit of blocks to cover, but I was nice, not stupid. Well, not that stupid, considering the pill-sickened state I had put myself in. Mr. Man says,
You're sick. You need ride.
Okay, guy can't take a hint. I told him again that I didn't need a ride, but thanks. I started to walk faster and cross the street. Unfortunately, it was a one-way, and he pulled up close enough to the curb that he could grab me from the driver's seat. Alright, now I'm getting scared. It's almost 3 a.m., and no one is out on this side of the street.
No, you get in now.
I was feeling really sick and embarrassed at this point. I was trying to hold off throwing up in front of this guy, and I know I'm about to hurl again and getting pissed, so I yelled,
No, I know get in now.
Look, dude, I'm not gonna suck your dick, so just fucking leave. And then I puked. Now, I was always on the small side and hung around and lived in places where it was a good idea to have some sort of protection. Tonight I had my gravity knife tucked in my boot, so when Mr. Good Samaritan started to get out of his car as I bent over, I pulled it and let the blade slide out as I stood up and said, "Please, just leave me the fuck alone." His eyes focused on the knife, and he got back in the car. Like I said before, his car was a piece of shit, so when he took off, it was really loud. I watched him turn the corner and started back on my wall crawl home. As I turned the next corner, lo and behold, there he was at the end of that street. He took off again when he saw me stop and stand there looking at him. But the whole way back home, I would either see him or hear his muffler. I still hadn't put my knife away because I knew if he actually got a hold of me, I was in no condition to be able to get him off of me without a lucky stab. He actually drove by me as I was fighting to open the door to my crappy little duplex. My roommate and I lived on the bottom floor, but once I got in, I felt pretty safe enough to crawl to the couch and pass out because my roommate's big-ass skinhead boyfriend was there with her and his pit-something mix, who was a love bug, but smart enough to know when not to be. When I finally woke up the following evening, those things hit me really hard. My roommate told me she couldn't believe I had slept through all the ruckus. Apparently the dog had started barking around 4:30 a.m. and wouldn't stop, so they let him out of the room and tried to go back to sleep. But Rudy wasn't having that. They came back out to tell him to shut up, and he was running back and forth between the back corner window and the window behind the couch I was passed out on, which was the actual backside, finally standing on the couch over me and going batshit crazy, acting like he was trying to bite through the friggin' glass without me waking up. My roommate later told me she had checked to make sure I hadn't OD'd and died. This was the point where my roomie's boyfriend decided to go check out what the heck his dog was trying to kill. He grabbed the bat we kept by the door and made his way to the back where the window met the couch. He heard a lot of noise going on the other side. Living in a crappy part of the city, there was a lot of crap around the building. And then a car starting up, a loud car. By the time he ran to the front, the car was halfway down our street. When he made his way back around to check the window Rudy was trying to eat through, there was a bunch of crates to move from under the first window he was barking at, stacked up under the window where the couch was, and the screen had been cut where you put your fingers through to open it. I always read these threads where people say, "I'm getting goosebumps just writing this," and shake my head thinking so overdramatic. And now I feel like an a-hole, because there really is no way to describe how you feel reliving this. Over the next few weeks, the boyfriend and Supermutt stayed at our place because we kept hearing noises, and imagined or not, it scared the hell out of us. Quite a few times the boyfriend would run out when we would hear something, and would sometimes even catch a glimpse of the guy as he went around a corner, but he was never fast enough. Boyfriend would blame it on the guy being ninja fast, but we just knew he was too slow. Some may ask why we didn't just let Rudy out. This was a point in time in my state where they were thinking of outlawing pit bulls. They had a really bad rap. If we had let him out, Rudy would have caught him, and that would just end bad on a lot of levels. But seriously, what kind of person still tries to get into a house with a psycho pit bull and a 6'2" skinhead trying to kill you with a baseball bat? Now you might ask why we didn't call the cops. Well, like I said, I was into some bad stuff, and as a rule, punks don't like cops. However, the neighborhood I lived in, we all talked to each other, and some of them were cop callers. My next-door neighbor knew what was going on and called the cops one night when she heard someone in her kitchen. She lived alone. She locked herself in her bathroom and started yelling that the cops were on their way, but the guy was persistent and was trying to pick the lock from the outside until he actually heard sirens and booked it. The lady said she heard a loud car start and looked out the bathroom window that faced the street to see, you guessed it, a crappy old green car drive away. When I heard about this, I felt really bad. I mean, this lady was like 87 or so and lives alone. What would have happened if that dude got in? Why, oh why didn't we let Rudy eat him? When the cops finally got there, the three of us were outside, so they started asking us if we heard or seen anything, so we told them what had been going on. And I gave a description of who I had thought was doing it, but also said I wasn't sure of details because I hadn't been feeling well at the time. The cop that was writing it down almost threw his pad and pen down, saying that if people like us, punk rock, smarted up and called the police, they could have got this guy. Apparently Mr. Get In Now fit the same description as a guy they were looking for that was wanted for quite a few sexual assaults around the train station. Now I felt really bad, but still had to give the cop lip over the people like us statement. But that's not the point. I've been clean over 15 years and don't live near town anymore, so I'm pretty sure I would handle things different now, and I know if I hadn't been messed up, then I would have. As far as I know, they never caught the guy. So Mr. Get In Now, let's not meet, 'cause I will let my dog chew your ass.
A Visit from My Great-Grandmother by B-Girl20, narrated by Frybro Sir.
This story happened when I was 17 years old, but before I explain, let me give a little bit of background information. So, I started believing in the paranormal when I was about 11. My aunt lived in a weird house where you could just sense that someone or something was in the house with you, especially the basement. As I gradually got older, I always seemed to have experiences wherever I went. I don't know if the spirits are attracted to me or that the spirit that my adopted aunt unleashed while playing with the Ouija board likes to follow me around. Either way, no matter where I went, I always seemed to have paranormal experiences. This particular story isn't scary, but it's really creepy nonetheless. A few years after my parents had separated, we moved to a suburban town in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. It was just my mom, my younger brother, and I. We moved into a townhome with a 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, and unfinished basement. My mother and younger brother had moved in before I did, since we were all living together before moving into the townhome, and she painted the living room walls brown and the lights in the main upstairs bathroom give off an orangey color. My brother had the room at the end of the hallway, which was pretty small. I had the room beside the bathroom, and my mom had the room beside my brother's. This room in particular was the creepiest when I had first moved in. I would walk into the room and the whole place just felt heavy and unwelcoming. I had a couple of experiences before this, like my door slowly closing on its own, and my brother and his friends and I getting partially possessed by something. But those are different stories for another time. This story in particular is the story that I would like to talk to you guys all about, but because there's no explanation as to why it happened, I could have hallucinated it all, but once you hear the story, you too will agree that there's no explanation behind it. So, like I said, I was 17 when this happened. It was late at night and I was sleeping in my room. My brother was also asleep in his room, and my mother was the only one up watching TV downstairs with our 9-year-old. Our purebred husky named Dakota was also with them. I was awoken by the presence of a dog and a light growling noise coming from the area where I could feel the presence. Thinking it was my dog Dakota, I waved my hand in the air and said, Not now, Dakota. Not now, Dakota. I could still hear the light growling, so in an annoyed voice, I lifted up my head and looked downwards, only to yell, "Dakota, not now!" Only to find that he wasn't there. I looked to my door and saw that it was closed. In confusion, I thought nothing of it and that I was hallucinating and fell back to sleep. Minutes later, I got woken up by the same growling noise, a bit louder this time. Again, I waved my hand in the air. "Dakota, not now!" And again, he kept growling, and I yelled, "Dakota!" Only to find him not there. I looked to my door in confusion, still not thinking anything of it. I just chalked it up to me being tired again. I then fell back asleep. Then, I was woken up by a loud bark that filled my room, and I sat straight up in my bed. I looked around in confusion, not knowing where the hell it came from, feeling kind of creeped out and scared. I got up from my bed and ran downstairs to see our dog beside my mom on the ground watching TV. Even though I knew he couldn't have been in my room, there was part of me that thought my mind had been playing tricks on me. So I asked her, "Hey Mom, was Dakota in my room just now?" She looked over at me in confusion. "No, he was down here the whole time." I felt really creeped out and confused, and I really didn't want to go back to my room at this point, but I went back to bed. And it didn't take me long before I fell asleep, because after I heard that loud bark that filled the room, I felt like a weight was holding the room down. It was lifted, felt lighter. A few years later, while hanging in the same room this incident happened, I told my younger cousin that lived in the house about all the weird and strange things that happened that night. She told me that it could have been our great-grandmother. I looked at her in confusion and asked how. She told me that during the time she had Alzheimer's, before her death, she would make little barking noises. I looked at her funny and asked her why she would do that. She told me she didn't know, and that it was something she would just do. So Grandma, if that was you that scared the hell out of me, or scared it away, I thank you very much, and miss you. If it wasn't you, then I'm glad I got the fuck out of there, because I don't know how long I'd be able to handle a haunted home.
Tug 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 by Flea. Narrated by Ank Miranda.
You could kick yourself in the middle of the night or early in the morning, depending on how you look at it, and freezing cold because you, like an idiot, kicked off your blanket in the night, nearly entirely off the bed. In fact, with only one lonely corner clinging to the edge of the bed. Sitting up, you take it into your hands, feeling that familiar fear from your childhood, that if you don't find something to cover yourself up, you are leaving yourself open to all sorts of supernatural horrors. You shrug it off with a chuckle and give the blanket a good hard tug, trying to pull it all up with one go. No luck, it seems to be stuck. Another sharp pull seems to free it a bit, and you work, tugging it back up and trying to ignore that silly feeling of growing dread. Tug, tug, tug. There, finally. The blanket is mostly back up on the bed, and you are safely beneath it once more, teasing yourself mentally for getting all worked up over nothing. Until, just before you drift back to sleep, you feel a tug from the one side still dangling down from where it had fallen before. Tug, tug, tug.
The Smiling Man in Black by Anonymous. Narrated by Stuart Schlomach.
When I was younger, I lived with my father and his mother. I was the only child, a boy at that, and my father was very protective of me. My grandmother, on the other hand, hated me. At first, she would just yell at me and shove me around when Dad was at work. It escalated quickly after he started working longer hours to make ends meet. I rarely saw my father at that point. For 4 years, she did things I can't even bring myself to really think about, not even enough to write it. For those 4 years, I prayed and prayed for release. I prayed and wished for her to die. To God, to whoever would listen. My dad probably would have believed me if I'd had a chance to talk to him, but she'd made me feel as though I were an abomination over the years, that I couldn't bear it anymore. After she killed my kitten and made me bury it at the age of 13, I attempted suicide by hanging myself inside my closet. Apparently, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, and the bar in the closet that I tied myself to fell on my head and knocked me the fuck out. I pulled myself up and headed to sneak into the bathroom without the monster cunt to catch me and give me another beating. As I left my bedroom, I caught a whiff of something very fucking rancid, like vomit, burning flesh, and blood, all mixed together, warm. I knew all of these smells fairly well, considering what my grandmother had done to me, and I thought for a moment it might have been my imagination, or her making something disgusting for me to eat to torture me more. While I recognized the separate smells in a way, I'd never smelled something like this. As I got closer and closer to the stairs, overlooking the living room, which was right across from the bathroom, I started to hear something, faintly. I remember hearing it a few feet back, but suddenly it seemed so much louder. My head was pounding, my heart was pounding, and all I could hear was gurgles, smack, smack, squish, squish, rip! The mere idea of peeking over the stairs and into the living room was suddenly so profoundly frightening that I almost just went back into my bedroom. But strangely enough, it was amazingly easy to just do it anyway. What I saw in the living room will never leave me for as long as I live, in more than one sense. My grandmother was lying on the ground. There was someone wearing black, kneeling over her. They were both covered in blood. The person's head was moving rhythmically over its hands, which held what I realized was some organ in her body. The person didn't look up, and I was scared silent. There was so much blood. So much blood. The sound of gnawing, the smacking mouth, the snapping of her bones as they were ripped from my grandmother's body. What was left of it. The brutally grotesque sight of her chest cavity having been torn open, and her body being consumed little by little filled me with terror I'd never known before. I didn't know what to do. It ate her body, slowly, seeming to enjoy every bite it took, its body swaying and moving so unnaturally that I couldn't even think it was human. I couldn't stop watching. I couldn't run away. The sheer terror of it choked the scream I would have let out. It stopped. I stopped. It looked at me after what seemed an eternity, releasing the contents of its mouth. Gory pieces and blood, some brown at that point, covered most of its face. What I could see of its face. It seemed to be male, very pale in patches. Where eyes were supposed to be were black pits. Pits that seemed to dilate, expand, and retract. He had no lips, but his mouth twitched, like some kind of hologram going in and out, slowly smiling, the smile expanding beyond normal human ability. I vomited and fainted. I woke up. My father was home and worrying over me. My grandmother's body was gone, along with all the blood. "Where's Grandma? Where is she?" I kept asking him, until I had to stop from the look in his eyes. He told me her heart was bad. She was in heaven now. I couldn't believe it. That was impossible, right? Did I imagine that whole thing? At her funeral, on the way to her burial site, I saw the man again. He looked more human, but I knew it was him. I remembered that smile. That day, I smiled back. I still have dreams about that man. Sometimes I think I see him in public. Even when I don't see him, I can feel him there. He's always there, watching me.